I saw you message that net neutrality was like a big corporate takeover government thing. Do you want to tell me
Yeah,
your
sort of.
thoughts? Or
Yeah, I think I said corporatist scam probably. Certainly big government. I think like a lot of these things, you end up with big multi-billion-dollar corporations who want to use government as muscle to help them become competitive, and that isn't that palatable. So they come up with these scams and they market it to people, well-meaning do-gooders, and they say something like, we're fighting for freedom, and then you get well-meaning people like you who get duped into doing the legwork of corporations like Google and Netflix who want to benefit by telling the government to tell the ISPs what to do. So that's what I mean by scam.
how do you feel about rent seeking?
In what way?
Well, the commonly defined term for rentiers and economically rent seekers are they're basically leeches on the system. They get themselves in a position where they no longer have to compete, and they take advantage of their privileged position to extract rent from other entities without having to do any work. So an example
Right.
of a rent seeker would be back in the old days, you'd want to travel down a road, and a bunch of bandits would be on that road, and they would give you the opportunity to either pay them or they would rob you. And, highway robbery was what that was called. And now we have the same rent seeking by those same companies that you've described. So the problem that we have is, in an ideal world, we wouldn't need any laws at all because everyone would just act well. But the world is not ideal, and collusion and collectivism is powerful and effective. The most powerful things in the world are collective groups of humans. And one of the best ways that we've found to overcome the negative aspects of collectivism, whether it is corporatism or tribalism or nationalism or government evil, is through the enforcement of rights. And so I do agree with you that government intervention often turns out very poorly. I do agree with you that giant multi-billion-dollar corporations don't really need a subsidy from the common man in the form of taxes that get passed on to them. In this case, however, it is very unique because the bandwidth that we use to communicate is and always will be, until mesh networks are ubiquitous, which isn't coming anytime soon, quite restricted. So in the example of highway robbery, you could say, how dare you regulate against highway robbery? You could just choose to use a different road. But that argument doesn't work because you can't choose to use a different road. And by that same token, you could argue, how dare you try and regulate what an ISP has to do on their lines, on their bandwidth? But it's a special case because there's a very finite number of high bandwidth entry points into your home. You maybe have fiber. You maybe have a single cable. And that's it. That's it. Your only other option is satellite with high latency and very low up bandwidth. So since we have a tragedy of the commons, or an emergent tragedy, which is we have very few choices, then those choices must be regulated to allow for competition. Because if you don't force the competition through rights or through government intervention, you will get emergent monopoly, and it will be bad for the consumer. The consumer has never had less choice in banking. The consumer has never had less choice in ISP. The consumer has never had less choice on where to buy products. Companies have been merging and merging and merging. There's only 6 media companies now. There's only 30 big banks. There used to be hundreds. And the only way to stop the reduction of choice and the reduction of competition is through government intervention, because it's already as bad as it can get. Now, could those laws be done poorly? Sure. Could they have been written by idiots? Sure. But is the goal a good goal to have? If you believe in free markets, they must be able to be entered and exited, and you must be able to compete. And if one piece of shit company owns the line that goes into your house, you can't compete. Just like Ma Bell. Ma Bell used to be the only game in town. Then they broke Ma Bell up into a bunch of competitors, and now you and me are talking for free. And that would never, ever, ever have happened if Ma Bell didn't get broken up. So the situation we're in is they've already captured the regulators, and they're already, no one wants to be a stupid middleman that makes no money. Everybody wants to pretend that they're generating the content and that they have the network effect. So every piece of crap middleman that sells a commodity that has a tube, a pipe that goes into your house, wants to extract the maximum value out of the data that's going into your house. So they try and sell your browsing activity. They try and reroute the ads that go to you with their own ads. They try and sell keyword analysis on your emails. They do everything they can to suck equity and money out of out of the users of their commodity, because they don't like being a commodity and making low profits. And that is, all of those things are terrible and evil and bad for the consumer. And the only way that you won't have those evil things happening is if you have free competition, which can't happen because there's only one cable and one fiber going into your house. Or you got to put it as a law. And right now, the consumer and the average human being that's interested in anonymity or privacy or security is fucked. They have no hope of regaining their personal sovereignty, none whatsoever, except in the few countries where they have made it a law. I saw on that list 6 countries, Costa Rica, Estonia, Finland, some other places, where they made it a law that you have to be able to get internet access, and that the internet access you get can't be screwed with. And that's super important, because the free market is not free in this instance. You don't have choices. So we must fix that problem with law. Now, preferably good laws. Maybe this current law is terrible. You know, the opposite of a bad law is a good law. It's not no law, right?
When have you ever seen